My ex humiliated me at our friend's wedding, saying I never amount to anything in front of the whole table. Joke's on him, I just bought the company he got fired from. Now he's sliding into my DMs asking for a job. Nope. It happened at one of those lavish weddings that everyone looks forward to for months. Picture a classy vineyard ceremony in Napa Valley, with twinkling fairy lights and an open bar flowing all night. It should have been a beautiful celebration of my friend's happiness. Instead, for me, it turned into a nightmare I've replayed in my head 100 times. That was the night my ex, Jason, decided to publicly humiliate me in front of all our friends. We were seated at a round table draped in white linen, clinking champagne glasses and making small talk about our lives. I hadn't spoken to Jason in over a year, we'd been diligently avoiding each other since the breakup, but of course a twisted seating chart had other plans. There he was, 2 seats over, looking smug in his tailored suit and basking in the attention of our mutual friends. I could smell the whiskey on his breath from where I sat. I kept my head down, focusing on my dinner and chatting with the friend on my other side. I was determined to be civil or, at best, invisible, hoping he'd just ignore me. But then someone at the table asked, "So, how's that startup of yours going, Jess?" I started to answer, explaining how I'd been working on a new app with a small team. I tried to sound upbeat even though inside I felt self-conscious. The truth was, at that point my startup was more of an overworked hobby, no big successes yet. I said something like, "It's been tough, but we're making progress. We just got our first pilot client." Before I could finish, Jason cut in with a loud, drunken laugh. He practically spit out his drink. "Her startup? Oh, please," he scoffed, and my stomach twisted into a knot. The table went silent, all eyes darting between us. My cheeks burned hot. Jason leaned back and said, loud enough for several tables to hear, "Look, I'm all for chasing dreams, but let's be real. Some people just don't have what it takes. I mean, come on, we all know Jess here. She's been fumbling around with this little project for how long now? 2 years." His words slurred slightly, he was definitely drunk, but each one felt sharp as a dagger. My heart was pounding out of my chest. I wanted to either punch him or vanish into thin air, maybe both. I caught my friend Myra's wide, horrified eyes across the table. Someone muttered, "Dude, not cool," but Jason kept going, acting like he was doing me a favor by being honest. He shrugged and added, "Jess, you should just give it up and get a real job already. You don't want to be the pathetic one still asking her parents for rent at 30. I felt tears prickling at the corners of my eyes, but I refused to cry in front of him. My throat locked up. I managed to croak, "Shut up, Jason," but my voice cracked, which only made his smirk widen. Then he delivered the final blow, "Face it, you'll never amount to anything." He said it with a cruel certainty that knocked the breath right out of me. Time slowed down. I became hyper-aware of the clink of silverware at nearby tables, the distant sound of the band playing a cheerful pop song, the stunned looks of everyone at our table. My face was on fire. Under the table, I balled up my napkin in my fist so hard my knuckles went white, just to keep myself anchored. I couldn't muster any comeback. Not then. My hands were shaking and my mind was blank except for a storm of shame and fury. All I managed was a strangled "excuse me," before pushing my chair back and fleeing. As I rushed away, I heard someone hiss, "What the hell, man," at Jason, but I didn't dare look back. I ended up in the empty bridal suite down the hall, where I collapsed onto a velvet ottoman, tears of rage and humiliation streaming down my face. I bit down on a towel to muffle my sobs, desperate not to be heard and cause a scene. My chest ached with that toxic mix of hurt and anger. I felt small and pathetic, exactly how he wanted me to feel. Worst of all, a part of me feared he might be right. Staring at myself in the mirror, mascara smudged, eyes red, face flushed, I felt something harden inside me. That humiliation and fury crystallized into a resolve so strong I could almost touch it. I took a shaky breath and made a silent promise to my reflection, I will prove him wrong. I didn't know how yet, but I would. I was done letting Jason's words define me. That was the breaking point. But to really understand why his words cut so deep, I need to take you back a few years, back to when I first met Jason, back when I actually cared about his opinion. We met during my junior year of college at UCLA. I was 20, ambitious but a bit unsure of myself, juggling a double major in computer science and business. He was 22, a recent grad back on campus to visit some frat buddies. We crossed paths at a party thrown by a mutual friend. Back then, Jason had effortless charm. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a grin that lit up the room. When he struck up a conversation with me that night, asking about my interests, I was drawn in immediately. I was a little tipsy and feeling bold when I told him I was teaching myself to build mobile apps and hoped to start a tech company one day. Instead of laughing or brushing it off, he looked genuinely impressed. "That's awesome. You're probably the smartest person here," he said. Coming from a guy who already had a job lined up at a prestigious tech firm, that felt like high praise. I soaked it up. We started dating soon after. In the beginning, he truly seemed supportive. He'd ask about the app one was working on, bring me late night coffee while I coded, and brag to his friends that I was going to be the next Zuckerberg or something. I fell for him hard, thinking I'd found someone who believed in me as much as I did. After I graduated, I decided not to play it safe with a corporate job. Instead, I'd have straight into a startup idea I'd been nurturing. It was an app called QuickShift that would connect small businesses with on-demand temporary staff, basically Uber for temp workers. A cafe could find a last-minute barista for a day, a boutique could get a fill-in cashier for a weekend. I had some savings from internships and freelance gigs, just enough to scrape by for a bit. My parents were skeptical, but I wanted to give it a shot. Jason claimed he understood. By then, he'd started a career at a mid-sized tech company called Cloud9 Systems, working in sales. We moved in together in San Francisco to split rent, and for a while it felt like we were both hustling toward big goals. The first few months of trying to launch QuickShift were exhilarating and terrifying. I worked out of our cramped apartment, coding at the kitchen table from morning till night. Jason would come home from his 9 to 5 and ask how my day went. He seemed interested at first, but as my savings dwindled and my app still wasn't making any money, his attitude started to shift. I remember one night about 6 months in, I had finally gotten a local coffee shop to agree to test QuickShift to find a part-time barista. I was thrilled. It felt like real progress after endless cold calls and rejections. I practically jumped on Jason with excitement when he walked through the door. But instead of celebrating, he just looked exhausted and said, "That's cool, Jess. But did they pay you, or is this another free trial?" The way he said free trial made my stomach drop. I admitted it was just a pilot run, hoping it would lead to a paid contract. He just shook his head and sighed. That led to our first real fight about my startup. He was stressed from covering most of our bills, true, I was basically broke, and said he was worried I was wasting my time. Maybe I should get a real job, since he didn't want to keep footing the rent while I chased a fantasy. I was crushed. I thought he of all people believed in me. We yelled, I cried, he half apologized. I promised I'd find a way to bring in money soon, but an invisible wedge had lodged between us. After that, tension hung in the apartment. He'd make snide comments if he left for work and I was still in pajamas, like must be nice to have nothing urgent to do. If I tried to show him a new feature I coded, he'd give a disinterested great, barely glancing up from his phone. I felt guilty every time I spent money on anything non-essential. To appease him, and to pay the bills, I picked up some freelance coding gigs. It helped a bit with finances but slowed down progress on QuickShift. Around a year into my startup journey, roughly 18 months of living together, we hit the breaking point. I landed QuickShift's first paying client. A small chain of bakeries agreed to a 3-month pilot for $500. It was modest as far as income, but to me it was huge validation. I cooked Jason's favorite dinner that night to celebrate and eagerly told him the news. He gave a half-hearted congrats, then immediately asked, "So does this mean you can start paying your half of the rent now?" Over dessert, no less. I was stunned. I said, "It's a start. It's only going to grow from here." He rolled his eyes and said, "Jess, it's been a year. One little client isn't turning this hobby into a real business. I'm tired of bankrolling everything while you play entrepreneur." That stung. I snapped that I was not playing. I was building something for us, for our future. He scoffed and said he didn't sign up to date a workaholic dreamer, and he was done waiting for me to grow up. Then came the ultimatum, get a stable job to contribute, or he was out. It got ugly. I told him he'd regret not believing in me, and he laughed and said, "I'll regret it when I see you actually succeed." Oof. A week later, he was gone, moved out and done with me. He left behind a lot of hurt and one final gift, the burning determination to prove him dead wrong. The weeks after the breakup were a blur of tears and anger. I felt like I'd failed at everything, but when the initial despair subsided, it gave way to a hardened resolve. If Jason thought I was nothing without a steady paycheck, I was going to show him what a dreamer could do. I refocused on QuickShift with a vengeance. I downsized to an even tinier apartment and took a part-time night job to keep the lights on. Every daytime hour went into the startup, coding, cold emailing, walking into local shops to pitch them my service, whatever it took. It was exhausting and often demoralizing. For every yes, I got 20 no's. But each small victory kept me going. A new business signing up, a thank you message from a gig worker who found a job through our app, those little things fueled me. I also roped in my college friend Alex as a co-founder. He had a comfy developer job but was itching to build something of his own, and he believed in QuickShift's potential. With him on board, we accelerated. We spent our nights and weekends tweaking the app and strategizing, living on ramen and caffeine. Slowly but surely, our user base grew. By a year post-breakup, a few hundred people were using QuickShift and a few dozen businesses were regularly posting gigs. It wasn't huge, but it was real. Money was still tight, and we knew we needed serious funding to scale. So we started the grueling process of pitching venture capitalists. I heard every form of no imaginable. Too small. Too niche. Come back when you have more traction. Each rejection was a punch in the gut. Still, I'd paste on a polite smile and move on to the next meeting, then maybe go home and scream into a pillow. I refused to quit. I couldn't quit. Finally, after dozens of rejections, we found an angel who believed in us. Her name was Priya, a former founder herself, and she saw potential where others didn't. She put in $100,000, giving us the runway to really grow. With that money, we hired an extra engineer, polished the app, and expanded into a couple more cities. Users and revenue slowly but surely ticked up. Fast forward a couple more years of insane hustle. QuickShift kept growing. We raised another round of funding, hired a small team, and gained some recognition in the startup world. We even got a nice write-up in TechCrunch as a startup to watch. By year 4, we had tens of thousands of users and solid revenue from paying clients. I had gone from a scrappy solo founder to the CEO of a company that actually mattered. And yeah, every now and then I'd think about Jason's sneer and smile to myself. I didn't need to say a word to him, but damn if it didn't feel good knowing I proved him wrong by living my best life. Then came the twist that cranked my personal satisfaction up to 11. We started talks with a bigger tech firm, Horizon Star, that was interested in partnering with, or maybe acquiring, us. As I dug into their info, I learned they weren't doing so hot. Apparently they'd lost some big clients and had laid off a bunch of staff to cut costs. The name Horizon Star pinged the back of my mind. A quick LinkedIn search later, I discovered why. That was the company Jason had jumped to after leaving Cloud9. He'd been a sales director there, right up until those recent layoffs. His profile now said seeking new opportunities. Oh, the irony. Armed with that little nugget of information, I walked into negotiations with Horizon Star feeling a level of confidence that I can only describe as cinematic. They needed us more than we needed them, and I wasn't about to let them swallow the company I built. In a bold move, I suggested the inverse: how about we acquire them? It sounded audacious, we were the smaller fish, but thanks to our growth and backing, we actually had the leverage. To the surprise of everyone, especially Horizon Star's execs, that's exactly what happened. We hammered out a deal for QuickShift to acquire Horizon Star's core assets and client contracts. My little startup effectively bought out the company where my ex had worked. The press release framed it as a strategic merger, but let's be real, we won. About a week after that news hit the tech blogs, I got a LinkedIn notification on my phone. I almost dropped it laughing when I saw the name Jason, last name, had sent me a message. He started off by congratulating me on QuickShift's success and the Horizon Star deal. Then he actually wrote, "I know things ended rough with us, but I am truly impressed by what you've done. You really proved me wrong." I smirked hard at that. Finally, he got to the point. He was looking for new opportunities and wondered if my company had any openings for someone with his experience, or if I could put in a good word for him somewhere. I read that message twice, just to drink it in. The same guy who once told me to give up was now asking me for help. The audacity and irony were off the charts. I felt an overwhelming wave of vindication. Talk about full circle karma. I took a long moment to decide how to play it. I thought about firing back a snarky one-liner or maybe listing every instance of his past cruelty. But you know what? I didn't need to say anything. My success was speaking loud and clear. I didn't owe him a damn thing, not a reference, not a job, not even a reply. So I gave him nothing. I left his message on read and didn't respond. The next day, he sent a follow-up, "Hey, just wanted to make sure you saw my message. If you hear of anything, let me know." Oh, I saw it. I left that one on read too. He didn't try again. I guess even he realized the ship had not only sailed, but it was a freaking yacht now and he wasn't on it. In the end, my silence said everything. He went from publicly humiliating me to being ghosted by me. So that's the story. My ex told me I'd never amount to anything. Joke's on him, I worked my ass off and built a company, and even ended up owning the company that kicked him to the curb. And when he tried to slither into my DMs looking for a favor, nope, not a chance.